Pennsylvania was once home to some of the most breathtaking vacation destinations in all of America. Until you find heart-shaped bathtubs filled with black mold and stagnant water. Carousel horses frozen mid-spin, their glass eyes long gone. A town where the ground still burns beneath your feet. And luxury ballrooms where the only guests now are ferns growing a meter tall in empty swimming pools. Some of these places welcome thousands of families every single summer. Others were the chosen sanctuaries of New York's elite. A few defined what romance even meant for an entire generation. And the most haunting part is not that they were abandoned. It's how completely the forest has already forgotten they ever existed. These are 11 places that were Pennsylvania's vacation capitals. Now they're in ruins. Let's begin with number 11, the Lost Pines Refuge in the heart of Pennsylvania. Imagine walking along a path where the pavement has been almost entirely devoured by thick roots and vibrant moss that silently reclaims its territory. This place, once the epicenter of rest and joy for thousands of families, now feels like a horror movie set, frozen in time, a monument to human transience. Upon crossing the threshold of what used to be the main lobby, the atmosphere changes drastically. The air becomes thick, and sunlight filters through holes in the roof in solid beams, illuminating millions of dust particles that dance in the stagnant air like tiny ghosts. The carpets, once vibrant with 1970s colors, burnt oranges and olive greens, are now a damp, brown mass that exudes a pungent odor of earth, mold, and neglect. The walls display layers of history like old skin. The floral wallpaper peels away in long, languid strips, revealing the wood and plaster skeleton that still supports the structure. It's a visual feast of decaying textures. The rusted metal of the pendant lights, which once cast a warm glow, contrasts with the soft emerald green mold that creeps up the reception desks, where excited guests once signed their registration forms. Each footstep sounds like a dry, deliberate crackle over broken glass, and the yellowed remnants of tourist brochures that, with heartbreaking irony, still promise the best vacation of your life. The visual narrative of this space demands a camera that moves with an almost ritualistic slowness, capturing the detail of an overturned wicker chair in the middle of a ballroom. There, the hardwood floor has buckled under the seepage of water, forming impossible waves that resemble a sea of petrified wood. In the corners, old pianos display their keys like broken teeth, and the large windows, now without panes, allow the vegetation outside to peek through, stretching its tendrils inward as if trying to reclaim the abandoned furniture. The atmosphere is heavy, laden with a dampness that seems to cling to the skin, reminding us with every breath that nature possesses infinite patience. What humankind builds with pride and effort, time unravels with terrifying slowness, transforming the architecture of pleasure into a sanctuary of melancholy. It is a silent reminder that in the end, we are only temporary visitors in a world that always returns to its roots. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to keep discovering the most incredible towns, places, and stories in Pennsylvania in every new video. Number 10. Grossinger's Catskill Resort, New York. Although technically crossing the line into the unconventional, this behemoth stands as the mother of all holiday ruins. Its influence on the region was so pervasive that it redefined the concept of mountain tourism for decades. Upon arriving at Grossinger's, the first thing that strikes you is not just the abandonment, but the almost mythical scale of its indoor pool. It's a space that feels like a cathedral dedicated to leisure, now desecrated by vibrant graffiti and untamed vegetation that refuses to be invited in. The water has been gone for decades, leaving behind a chasm of white tiles stained black and ochre by mineral leaching. In that void, where the laughter of New York's elite once splashed, ferns now grow to a meter in height, nourished by the decomposition of organic matter. The majestic glass roof, which once allowed bathers to watch the snow fall in perfect contrast to the warm water, is now shattered. Fragments of glass act as prisms, scattering light onto a mixture of hail, rain, and debris that accumulates at the bottom of the pool, creating its own somber ecosystem. The dining halls, which in their heyday served thousands of guests, are now endless expanses of darkness and silence. The solid wood tables, witnesses to lavish banquets, are slowly disintegrating under the weight of years and the relentless humidity of the Catskills. Preparing for this visual feast includes observing how moss has woven a natural carpet over the cold concrete, softening with a poetic cruelty the edges of the staircases that once led to the luxurious suites. It is a disturbing mix of opulence and death. You can still see the crystal chandeliers hanging precariously from bare wires, swaying with a ghostly tinkling sound in any breeze that slips through the broken windows. The light here is dramatic, almost theatrical. It filters in at sharp angles, creating elongated shadows that resemble human figures, dancing an eternal waltz in the absolute silence of the mountains. Every corner of Grossinger's whispers a tale of fallen grandeur, reminding us that even the most solid empires of pleasure eventually succumb to the slow, verdant embrace of nature that ultimately reclaims what was always hers. Number 9. The Lookout of the Valley of Shadows. Located on one of the steepest and most challenging slopes of the mountain range, this former luxury hotel offers a panoramic view that today, stripped of its former glory, is profoundly melancholic. What was once a perfectly manicured terrace, a haven of order and sophistication where high society guests sipped tea while gazing at the endless Pennsylvania horizon, has now transformed into an impenetrable jungle. Thorny bushes and saplings have waged a silent battle against the architecture, pushing through the concrete with an unstoppable biological force, cracking the ground once trod by elegant shoes. The building's main structure stands like a wounded sentinel, resisting the ravages of oblivion with tragic dignity. Its steel beams, once the pride of local engineering, are now completely covered in an orange crust of rust that flakes off at the slightest touch, turning into metallic dust scattered by the wind. Walking through the corridors of the rooms, the air changes. There's an abrupt temperature shift, an almost mineral chill emanating from the stone walls. These have absorbed decades of relentless winters without the refuge of heating, preserving the dampness as a frigid reminder of the years of neglect. Inside the suites, the porcelain bathtubs, still retaining a ghostly whiteness in some sheltered corners, are filled with dried leaves and fragments of plaster from ceilings that have collapsed under the weight of snow, accumulated year after year. The aesthetic of this place is based on a stark visual contrast. The intense, vibrant blue of the sky, perfectly framed by the frameless windows, clashes with the ashen gray of the interiors, ravaged by old fires or the rot of damp. Although there is no trace of human life, the hotel is no longer empty. The traces of the animals that have made these ruins their home are evident and tell their own story of occupation. Birds' nests sway on the skeletons of crystal chandeliers, and raccoon tracks are imprinted in the fine dust covering the remains of rotting wooden furniture. It is a choreography of slow, natural destruction, where the dominant color is the ochre of rust, punctuated by the emerald green of ivy. This climber ascends the Ionic columns with absolute determination, enveloping the stone as if to strangle the last vestiges of human ambition and return the mountain to its original wild state. Number 8. The Black Forest Amusement Park. Hidden among the dense, shadowy pines of Pennsylvania, this former amusement park has transformed, over the decades, into a labyrinth of twisted metal and grayish wood that defies any recreational logic. What was once a sanctuary of laughter and adrenaline for East Coast families is now a graveyard of mechanical dreams, swallowed by the forest. The wooden roller coaster, which in its heyday thrilled thousands with its dizzying drops, now stands as a wobbly, spectral structure. The tracks, once a place of speed and exhilaration, are now covered in vines that twine around the rotting wood with the strength of a rope. The train cars, forever stopped at the departure station as if waiting for a generation of children that will never arrive, have become small ecosystems, filled with stagnant water, moss, and layers of decomposing leaves that exhale a sweet, funereal aroma. The visual setting of this scene is both fascinating and terrifying. The colors of the rides, once fiery red and bright yellow to attract curious onlookers, have faded under the ravages of time to dreary, pale, and peeling pastel shades. The booths of the carnival games still bear their hand-painted signs, with circus-inspired typography that evokes a bygone golden age. However, time has been cruel to the iconography. The faces of the clowns and animals have been erased by acid rain and wind, leaving empty eye sockets and blurred smiles that give them a ghostly and deeply unsettling appearance. The carousel, located at the heart of the grounds, is the very center of this ruin. The wooden horses, carved with a now vanished mastery, have lost their real mane tails and glass eyes. They stand there, frozen in a circular dance that will never begin again, while the central mechanism rusts until it is completely welded shut. The ground is covered with a thick carpet of pine needles that muffles the sound of footsteps, enveloping the visitor in a profound silence that is only broken, almost rhythmically, when the wind makes a rusty metal chain clang against the posts. It is a recipe for pure nostalgia, a reminder that human design is merely a suggestion in the face of the ultimate redesign by erosion and the untamed growth of nature. Number 7. The Summer Colony of Broken Dreams. This corner of Pennsylvania was once famous for its small log cabins, rustic retreats where families would spend months escaping the urban bustle to immerse themselves in the serenity of the mountains. Today, walking these streets is like wandering through a ghost town straight out of a dark and melancholic fairy tale. The cabins, built with sturdy logs and hand-picked river stones, are slowly sinking into the soft, damp forest floor as if gravity itself were eager to claim them. Many of these structures have lost their roofs under the weight of harsh winters, allowing the natural hierarchy to be inverted. Now, real trees grow in the center of what were once living rooms, stretching their branches skyward through the collapsed beams. Preparing this image requires a keen eye for the everyday details left behind, small fragments of interrupted lives that imbue the place with a tragic humanity. A metal coffee pot still rests on a rusted stove. A yellowed lace curtain flutters like a ghost in a window without glass. And a child's shoe, half buried in fallen leaves, tells a story of games that ended decades ago. Green is the absolute and sovereign color here. Dense, vibrant moss covers the stone fireplaces like a living skin, while vines seal the entrance doors with intricate natural knots. Ferns, nourished by decay, sprout with ironic vitality from the wool mattresses slowly rotting in the bedrooms. It is a scene of unsettling peace, where nature has not acted with the violence of a natural disaster, but with the patience of a verdant, damp embrace that envelops each structure until it suffocates its original purpose. The scent that permeates the air is an intoxicating blend of deep forest, damp old wood, and wildflowers growing unchecked where once there were perfectly manicured gardens and gravel paths. There's no noise from engines, no shouting, no radio music. The profound silence is broken only by the songs of birds that now nest in kitchen cupboards or in the gaps in the walls. These animals have transformed what was once a human refuge into an exclusive sanctuary for wildlife, proving that, in the eternal struggle between brick and mortar, time always ultimately vindicates the Earth. What was once a home is now merely compost for a world that doesn't need us to continue flourishing. Number 6. The Great Hall of the Emerald Lake. This resort, nestled in the remote foothills of the Pennsylvania mountains, was once considered the pinnacle of mid-century rustic architecture. It was a place where cutting-edge design met the warmth of the natural surroundings, creating a luxurious retreat for the post-war upper class. Its most iconic feature? The circular ballroom with glass walls that offered an uninterrupted 360-degree view of the lake is now a skeletal, ghostly structure that seems to float, almost miraculously, on the water's surface. The lake, which in past decades boasted crystal-clear waters meticulously maintained for the enjoyment of swimmers and small recreational boats, has transformed into a pool of thick algae, mud, and giant water lilies that cover almost its entire surface, like a biological crust. The preparation of this visual scene requires a cinematic eye that focuses on the reflection of the ruins in the stagnant water. On cloudy days, the lake's mirror creates a symmetrical image of perfect decay, where the real building and its submerged specter merge into a single, melancholic grayness. Upon crossing the threshold of the drawing room, the magnitude of the neglect becomes palpable. The remains of a grand piano, once filled with the melodies of jazz and chamber orchestras, rest on a wooden stage, crumbling under the weight of dampness. The piano strings, subjected to years of corrosion and strain, are broken and twisted like exposed nerves or the sinews of a forgotten beast. The red velvet chairs, once symbols of status and comfort, now bear a deep black hue due to mold, scattered haphazardly across a marble floor that has lost all trace of its former luster beneath a layer of sediment and bird droppings. Light floods in through the immense shattered windows, illuminating with merciless clarity the colorful graffiti that now covers the stone columns. This visual clash between contemporary street art and the classical architecture of the past creates a strange tension, a narrative of rebellion against the remnants of elegance. It is a place of extreme textures, the coldness of damp stone, the roughness of rusted metal that crumbles between your fingers, and the deceptive softness of mold that covers the furniture like skin. Every corner tells the silent story of a party that ended abruptly, leaving behind an empty stage where the only audience is the surrounding forest, a patient spectator that advances inch by inch, year after year, to reclaim its place. Number 5. Eastern State Penitentiary, Philadelphia. This is one of the most imposing, historically rich, and visually breathtaking places in the entire state. Eastern State Penitentiary is not just a ruined building. It was the most ambitious social laboratory of its time, the first prison in the world to implement total isolation as a method of reform. Today, a carefully managed ruin, the structure exudes an atmosphere of architectural heaviness that seems to trap the echoes of the thousands of men who sought, or lost, redemption there in absolute silence. Walking through its radial corridors, which extend like the spokes of a macabre wheel, the first thing that strikes the visitor is the monumental scale of decay. The stone walls, designed to be thick enough to prevent any sound from escaping, are slowly crumbling, revealing layers of whitewash and peeling paint that fall like dry snowflakes onto the concrete floor. The original design sought divine introspection, and this is manifested in the individual skylights of each cell, small openings in the ceiling known as God's eyes. Through them, sunlight filters in solid beams that illuminate the dust particles floating in the air, creating a dramatic contrast between the purity of the sky and the starkness of confinement. The iron gates, consumed by a deep orange rust, stand ajar, offering glimpses into the former homes of the inmates. In many cells, Nature has begun its silent colonization. Tiny blades of grass sprout from cracks in the floor, and mold traces impossible geographical maps on the stone walls. The visual staging of this space is a study in institutional decay. The rusted metal of the bed frames and broken pipes contrast sharply with the medieval solidity of the exterior walls. The atmosphere is one of dense silence, broken only by the constant drip of leaking water or the flapping of birds that have made the watchtowers their home. Unlike abandoned hotels or amusement parks, here the ruin evokes not nostalgia, but a profound reflection on justice and the passage of time. Each cell block is a gallery of extreme textures where the overhead light plays with elongated shadows to create a visual choreography that seems lifted from a Piranesi print. It is ultimately a physical reminder that even the most rigid systems of control eventually succumb to the patience of time, transforming iron and stone into a monument to the fragility of human institutions. Number 4. Centralia. This is the town that inspired countless nightmares and contemporary horror stories, a place where reality far surpassed fiction. Due to a coal mine fire that has been burning deep underground for over 60 years, this enclave was transformed from a thriving mining community into a gaping wound in the Pennsylvania landscape. The town was almost entirely abandoned, leaving behind a scene where geology and human negligence merged in an eternal, scorching embrace. The most visually striking feature, and what has become the symbol of this tragedy, is the old state highway, cracked and warped by the extreme heat. The pavement, designed to connect lives and destinies, has become a series of miniature tectonic plates that rise and fall. Through these deep, blackened fissures, a thick, constant smoke rises from the ground, a sulfurous breath that reminds visitors that, beneath their feet, hell still rages. The visual preparation of this stretch, known as the Graffiti Highway, is a clash of textures. The melted, sticky asphalt mingles with the grayish dust of the ash, while hundreds of layers of spray paint attempt to bring color to a place that the earth is reclaiming. As you venture deeper into what used to be residential areas, the atmosphere becomes even denser and more oppressive. The few remaining buildings are surrounded by vegetation that seems to have mutated under the influence of the subterranean heat. The trees grow in twisted shapes, their roots plunging into soil that, on certain winter days, remains strangely warm to the touch while the rest of the world freezes. No snow lasts here. It evaporates before it even touches the pavement, creating a constant mist that blurs the lines between the solid and the ethereal. The silence in this town is different from that of other ruins. It is not the silence of passive abandonment, but a stillness charged with an invisible and dangerous energy. The smell of sulfur permeates clothing and skin, a chemical recipe of decay that warns of the surface's instability. The government's warning signs, rusted and riddled with time, are the only permanent inhabitants. It is a choreography of invisible destruction, where the true monster is not seen but felt in the vibration of the ground and in the columns of steam that erupt from the cracks like sighs from an earth that will not stop burning until there is nothing left to consume. And remember to subscribe to the channel if you want to continue exploring the history, unusual places, and most fascinating corners of Pennsylvania. Number 3. The Kinzua Viaduct. Once considered the world's longest and tallest railway structure, an unyielding testament to 19th century industrial ambition and technical mastery, the Kinzua Viaduct soared above the valley like a black iron spiderweb, defying gravity and connecting the ends of a seemingly impassable gorge. Yet in 2003, the metal's grandeur met the unpredictable fury of the atmosphere. A tornado of devastating power toppled much of the bridge, bending the iron like mere wire and hurling tons of history into the abyss. Today, the scene unfolding before the visitor's eyes is both epic and heartbreaking. Enormous, twisted metal beams lie scattered at the bottom of the valley, haphazardly strewn like the bones of a steel giant fallen in battle. The visual setting of this place is overwhelming. From above, rust has stained the structures a burnt orange that starkly contrasts with the endless green of the Pennsylvania forest. The towers that once supported the passage of coal-laden locomotives now lie on their sides, half hidden by the vegetation that climbs their rivets, transforming the engineering structure into a kind of artificial terrestrial reef. To honor this ruin, a glass observation deck has been built, extending into the void and allowing tourists to peer directly into the abyss of the past. From this transparent vantage point, one can observe with almost painful clarity how nature has begun to reclaim the remains of this engineering marvel. Young trees grow between the gaps of the collapsed beams, and the river water flowing hundreds of meters below continues to erode the metal that once sought to dominate the landscape. Chromatic contrast is the protagonist of this choreography of destruction. The leaden gray of the sky is reflected in the glass of the walkway, while below, the ochre of rust and the emerald green of the pines wage a silent battle for space. The wind blows fiercely through the remaining wreckage, creating a metallic whistle that sounds like a lament for the age of steam. It is not only a site of disaster, but a sanctuary to human fragility, a reminder that even the strongest steel is vulnerable to the whims of the heavens, and that in the end, the earth always finds a way to digest our greatest ambitions. It is a visual recipe of beauty and terror, where the design of humankind has been ultimately reconfigured by the chaos of the storm. Number 2, the Railway Car Cemetery, Windber. What at first glance appears to be a metal graveyard is, in reality, an unwitting museum of American urban mobility. Hundreds of vintage streetcars and train cars which once traversed the noisy and vibrant avenues of cities like Philadelphia, Chicago, and New York rest here in forced retirement, forming endless rows of iron that disappear into the thick foliage. The sight of this scene is simply mesmerizing, a feast of contrasts where industrial archaeology merges with wild biology. The train cars, which in their heyday boasted bright colors and metallic finishes, are now encased in a thick crust of orange and dark red rust that peels away like old skin. Adding to this canvas of decay is contemporary graffiti. Neon-colored tags and murals attempt to draw attention to the corroded surfaces, creating a visual clash between the nostalgia of the past century and the rebellion of the present. Stepping inside one of these iron behemoths, the scene becomes even more surreal. Time has not only stopped the engines, but has organically reshaped the interiors. Light filters through the broken windows, illuminating a relentless process of transformation. Saplings and birch branches have managed to shatter the glass and now grow vigorously through the frames, reaching for the ceiling as if searching for a way out. The seats, once upholstered in elegant velvet and welcoming to passengers, are now damp and covered in mold, slowly becoming fertile compost for the forest floor that encroaches upon the corridors. Walking through this railway tunnel is an overwhelming sensory experience. The smell of rusting metal mingles with the fresh fragrance of pine resin and damp earth. The silence of the forest is broken only by the creaking of metal expanding in the heat or the rhythmic patter of rain on the perforated tin roofs. Each carriage tells a story of thousands of journeys, forgotten conversations, and a progress that ultimately left these empty shells behind. It is a choreography of destruction and rebirth, where nature waits for no one. It simply envelops the steel with its green tendrils, reminding us that even a nation's most extensive transportation network can end up being devoured by the silent, patient advance of the forest. Number 1. The Penn Hills Resort, Pocono Mountains. This was one of the most iconic and sought-after destinations for couples in its heyday, a sanctuary of kitschy romance that defined the concept of the mountain honeymoon. However, after decades of splendor, The resort closed its doors for good years ago, leaving behind a paradise of love that has now become a modern and decaying ruin. What was once the stage for eternal promises is now a graveyard of pop culture, where the famous heart-shaped bathtubs, the ultimate symbol of mid-century romantic opulence, are filled with debris, stagnant water, and black mold that seems to devour the memory of champagne toasts. The architecture of the 1960s, with its bold and sometimes extravagant design, is disintegrating under the relentless weight of snow and acid rain. Upon entering the bridal suites, the visual preparation is one of overwhelming melancholy. The red carpets, once synonymous with passion and luxury, are now shapeless, sodden masses that exhale a musty, damp scent. The mirrors on the ceiling, designed to amplify the intimacy of lovers, are cracked or broken, reflecting disconnected fragments of a ruined room. The light filtering through the shattered windows illuminates dust particles and remnants of gold-patterned wallpaper that hang like shreds of dead skin. The aesthetic of this place is ideal for understanding the transience of human pleasure. There is something profoundly unsettling and yet strangely poetic about watching nature reclaim these spaces. In the common areas, rotary dial telephones still sit atop reception desks, covered in a thin layer of ash and grime, while ice machines, once a technological luxury, rust in corridors where vegetation has begun to break through the tiled floor. It is a feast of contrasting textures, the softness of the mold covering the velvet headboards, the coldness of the rusted metal of the gilded faucets, and the crunch of glass under the explorer's boots. The atmosphere is heavy, laden with a nostalgia that feels almost physical. Here the silence is not empty. It is filled with the invisible echoes of an era of optimism and romance that has been replaced by the slow, verdant embrace of the forest. This complex is the final reminder that even the most commercialized love and its concrete temples eventually succumb to the passage of time, transforming the architecture of desire into a monument to oblivion. What did you think of this tour of the 11 vacation capitals of Pennsylvania that now lie in ruins?